Hi, I'm Anna Finch and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is about emotionally damaged characters. Basically, what are they? Some tips for creating them. Now, I don't know if emotionally damaged is like the correct term. This is the only thing I've known them as. So if there's another term that you guys think I could use, please tell me. Because I would like to know. Anyway, so what do I mean by emotionally damaged? Okay, so I've talked about complex characters in a previous video. Complex characters don't have to be emotionally damaged characters. Emotionally damaged characters don't have to, generally speaking, be complex characters. Okay, they can be both complex and emotionally damaged. They don't always have to be. I've got to get that out of the way first. So when we use the term emotionally damaged, and if there's another term that's more appropriate, let me know down below. This is the only term I know. You use this term to describe someone or how someone feels after they've been through an emotional trauma or hurt. So you use it to describe how the person or the character feels after the trauma, after the pain, after the hurt or the damage has occurred, not while it's occurring. So emotionally damaged person, according to this, is basically, because I've done research into it in order to make sure it was explained properly, it's basically a character, someone who has been through a trauma and you're focusing on the aftermath, how they react. Now, could the trauma be happening as part of the story? Yes. And they will, after each traumatic situation, their body will react, their mind will react in a specific way. But so emotionally damaged is used to describe someone, a being or a character, how they feel after the trauma has occurred. The person doesn't have to be human. They need to be a living being, or even a non-living being if you're writing about zombies or other things. But basically, they have to be sentient. I think it's the right term. They have to have they need to be sentient, meaning they need to be able to think, feel, and react to the world around them and communicate in some way. Does the communication have to be understood by everyone around them? No, but they need to be able to communicate in some way. Through sound, through feel, through touch, whatever it is. They have to communicate in some way. Now, here's the thing. Emotionally damaged characters, if done right, will feel real. And that's the goal when you come at writing emotionally damaged characters. They need to feel real. They need to feel like real people who have been hurt, but are still going forward, if that's what your story is. They need to be able, especially if they're the protagonist, people need to be able to root for them. Okay? Maybe they're in an abusive relationship and the abuse is constant and it's just getting worse and worse. You want to feel for that person. So if you don't do in the emotional damage correctly, maybe the climax of the story is they finally, or to the end, the climax of the story, they finally go, this is enough. I don't deserve this. They accept that they don't deserve it and they leave. They're still traumatized, okay? They may still feel conflicted about leaving and feel like maybe it's my fault, but they leave, right? If that's the goal of your story, is this person goes through trauma after trauma and they slowly realize, because they've built another connection with someone who shows them that they are worth something, that they are better than what their partner, their friend, their family has been saying they have been. And they've treated them and they've given them that sort of glimpse into a positive life. And that person goes, I am done. I'm leaving. That's a powerful moment. It's not always happy. It's definitely not sunshine and rainbows. The person's left. Doesn't mean everything's done and fixed. I know in my book I kind of I try to end on a happy ending. because there is trauma that happens between my main characters, particularly Mariah and Michael. And I do explore that briefly. There's a bit of a time skip between the one bit and the end. Now, I sort of end it on like a positive note, but when the book I'm currently writing, I'm focusing on one of the other characters who's been observed in the previous book as if they're fine, and I'm showing that they're not. And I'm going to show that these characters, although the first story ended happily, and it's still technically a happy ending, they are still affected by that trauma. They may act like they're not, but they're still affected by it. So it's not sunshine and rainbows. Maybe in that one moment they feel like top of the world, but then it moves on, and then it's like it's a struggle. So dealing with trauma is a struggle. It's something people deal with daily, on a daily basis. So you need to treat it seriously. So don't create an emotionally damaged character just cause. Think, we need to have someone in there that's a bit damaged, so people can like connect with them. That's not a great way to create a character. If you create a character, they have to be there for a reason. Okay, they have to feel real. Okay, they have to be there for a reason. And they have to have some sort of purpose. And the trauma, okay, you can't just go, oh yeah, this person's gonna have this background. Oh look, here's this funny thing. And treat the trauma as if it was something funny. You can't do that. Trauma is something serious. Now, people will poke fun at their own trauma. Okay? Humor is a defense mechanism. People will poke fun at their own trauma. Okay, so sometimes the characters may poke a bit of fun at their own trauma, their own reactions because of a trauma. Okay, because of a trigger. And that's just their way of coping. But here's the thing, when you're doing that, you need to make sure that it gets across clearly that this is their way of coping. This is not a comment on the actual trauma itself. This is showing this is how this person deals with it. It's not great, but this is how they deal with it. They try to laugh it off. They try and pretend it doesn't happen, right? But the trauma itself is serious. It's just that the character, okay, the person you're writing, is trying to poke fun at their own trauma in order to cope, because that's the only way they know how to cope. Because if, in some cases, they may be like, if I don't laugh at this, I'm going to break down into tears and curl up into a little ball and hide in a corner. And because they can't deal with the trauma, right? And you can write a character like that, and you can give hints into that deeper thing where it's like, I've got to act this way. I've got to make these sort of comments. I've got to pretend to be okay. Because if I don't, then what will happen to me? They might be afraid of how the trauma will affect them if they stop ignoring it. And so when you are writing trauma, you do need to take it very seriously. Don't trivialize the trauma the person goes through. There's a lot of trauma in Voiceless that the characters go through. Trauma doesn't have to be war. Okay, it doesn't have to be, the person went to war. Oh, look, they've got PTSD and they're traumatized. No. People develop traumatic responses, okay, or can be traumatized from even the simplest things. Their parent left them. They don't know why. Their mum, their dad left. They never came back. They've sent letters and they've tried to call, tried to find them, and they've never replied back. They just disappeared out of their lives and they have no idea why. Okay, that is traumatizing for a kid. Okay, it can be traumatizing for an adult too, where their partner leaves and they don't know why. When their husband or when their children disappear. It's traumatizing when the people that you love disappear and you don't know why. And particularly when it's a child whose parent has left them for some reason, they will feel like it's their fault, that something they did, that I did, something that they did caused the other person to leave. And they'll probably think, if I can fix this, if I can be this perfect person, maybe they'll come back. And particularly for children, that is very traumatic and it's very harmful to their psyche. So trauma doesn't have to be war, violence. It could be something as simple as they've been left behind. They don't know why. Okay, they feel abandoned. Abandonment issues are a real thing. Okay, bullying is traumatic. Okay, someone who has been bullied for significant periods of time will have a lot of self-esteem issues. They will think that there is something wrong with them, that something they did cause the other person to be bullied. I felt like that all the way out through primary, even high school. I thought there was something wrong with me because I was being bullied. And that's traumatic. Okay, so people who have been bullied will have self-esteem issues, confidence issues. Okay, they may feel like if I get close to this person, they will treat me the same way these other people are, and they might push away relationships, right? That's trauma. Okay, trauma doesn't have to be violence. It can be more subtle than that, and there can still be an emotionally damaged character because they haven't dealt with their issues. I certainly haven't dealt with all my issues, but I'm coping. I'm making connections and everything. So anything that every time we are affected by something, every time we are affected by something that leaves us emotionally drained and damaged, that is what is emotion. That's what basically emotionally damaged is. You are affected by something, impacted by something, exposed to something that leaves you drained and feeling broken and damaged. Okay, so some other examples could be someone betrayed your trust and you find it hard to trust others. Maybe your partner cheated on you, right? And you find it hard to trust on your next partner to be faithful. And maybe you are a bit more controlling and it's not a healthy relationship because you don't want to be betrayed again and you're worried about this other person betraying you, right? You compare a new love to an old love. That kind of is referenced in my next book because that is something serious. You compare yourself to others. You can keep people at arm's length. You can get angry over almost nothing. Person ate the last packet of chips. You blow your head off at the person. It's a packet of chips. Okay, you blowing up and screaming at the other person for eating your packet of chips is not a rational reaction. But put yourself in the shoes of someone who has grown up in a house where food was withheld, where they did something the parent didn't like. No food. Food was literally taken out of their hands because they said something that the other person didn't like. Maybe the other person or family they were with controlled what food they could have, and them having a packet of chips and someone else eating them just triggers them because they're like, this person is just like the person who would deny me food. Okay, so there will have to be a reason behind their reaction, but they might get angry over nothing. Person refuses to tell them where they've been, what movie they watched, whatever. They'll get angry over nothing. Some people can get angry over nothing. My character is like anger central. She is like a bundle of anger, repressed anger. She's like a mountain. She's like a volcano about to go off. It ain't going to be pretty when it does, but it'll be interesting to write. They might have anxiety over meeting new people, which my character does. They don't feel comfortable around new people. Or at least this next book, they don't feel comfortable around new people because they can't control it. Someone who's been denied control over their own lives, even the smallest bit, will want control. And it can be they become controlling or the controller in a relationship, which isn't good. But this is the only way they know how to deal with it, deal with the lack of control they've had over their own lives. There could be a traumatic breakup that maybe the person broke up with them over text, dodges their calls, looks the other way when they see him on the street. That's traumatizing. The person might be depressed for whatever reason. They might feel like they're better off alone. They might have substance abuse. Substance abuse doesn't have to be alcohol and drugs. It could be caffeine. It could be addiction through something on the TV. Maybe you binge Netflix. Every time you feel emotionally exposed, you binge Netflix for 8 hours. And it's the way to calm yourself down. So we all have our coping mechanisms, and sometimes the coping mechanisms can be okay, but then but they can also be in a way of escaping dealing with the trauma. Your friends could be telling you have issues, okay, and you're denying it. So these are just some little things, some little examples. So how to write these emotionally damaged characters. I've kind of gone a bit of a tangent. I'm just going to keep a bit more focused. How to write emotionally damaged characters. Well, first off, you need to know what sort of emotional damage you're talking about. Are you talking about long-term abuse? Are you talking about systemic abuse, so abuse by a system around them? Are you talking about cultural oppression, societal oppression? Are you talking about a domestic violence relationship? Are you talking about family, domestic abuse, abuse as a child? Are you talking about abandonment issues? What sort of damage does this character have? And does the character need it? Or rather, is the character a person with or without that damage? Because if all they are is the emotional damage, they're a one-dimensional character, and there is something seriously wrong with it. Okay? The emotional damage can't be the only thing about the character that you know about. So you can have a character, oh, Lucy, she just came out of a domestic violence relationship. Oh yeah, was she like, So you need to have, the characters have to be a person. The emotional damage is just an aspect of their background. It's just something that shows, that is expressed through how they act and how they interact with other people. It is not what they are. You can't make the emotional damage the person. Oh, this person is a soldier. They have PTSD. And all you have to focus on when you're writing that character, that soldier, is they're a soldier with PTSD. Okay. What else? They're not just a soldier with PTSD. They need to be a person. Do they have family? Do they have friends? Or has the PTSD, have they lost their friends since coming back from a war zone? Have they been found it difficult to get a job? You need to focus on the person, not the trauma when you're writing the character. The trauma is secondary to the character. It is just something that is expressed through the character's actions. It's not what the character is. And that's something you need to be very, very careful with. When you are talking about a character who is emotionally damaged, when you're writing a character that is emotionally damaged, it needs to be realistic. Okay, so someone who was abandoned by a parent, or who feels like they've been abandoned because the parent disappeared. They don't know what happened. Their other parent refuses to tell them. They can't find anything about it. The parent is just gone out of nowhere. So someone who has been abandoned, and that is their trauma, they won't react the same way as someone who is a soldier just coming out of a war zone, because their traumas are different. They will react differently. Now, there are some common elements when it comes to trauma. Okay, some things they might be overly aggressive. They might be overly submissive. It depends on what the trauma is. Okay, so depending on what the trauma is, the way they react will be different. So someone who's been abandoned, okay, will have abandonment issues. They might attach to someone and be overly attached to the person, and they might have a breakdown when they find the person is moving. Anything that changes, the person goes, I'm going to go to the city for an internship. The city's like a 2-hour drive away, right? I'm going to go to the city for an internship for 2 weeks. The person overreacts and go, you're leaving me, blah, blah, blah. The person will overreact and think that them leaving for the internship means that they are leaving permanently. Okay. It could be that they overly latch onto people. They could also then push people away, refuse to make attachments because they're like, well, I was attached to this person, they left me. I don't want to put myself in that position again, right? And they might push away any relationship. They develop a positive relationship, but then it's just like one thing that might set them off. It could be anything. And they're just like pushing another person away. It's like, no, I don't want to be around you anymore, blah, blah, blah. So the person with abandonment issues can latch on, can push away. They might find it difficult to make an emotional connection. That is something that might be reflected through their actions. This might be the sort of thinking that they have that is reflected through their actions. This will be different from a soldier who just came out of an active war zone and has been honorably discharged. So a soldier who's just come out of a war zone has been honorably discharged. They have not done any sort of, they've just been sent home. They have yet to be desensitized, or at least they haven't been eased back into normal life. They've just been dropped back in, saying, okay, and they might have given them a therapist, but they've been in a war zone. Okay, their friends have all moved on. They've got new lives. So they've just, because he went to war and he became a soldier, people stopped talking with him. He may only have one person he talks to. Maybe his family disagreed with him going to war. Maybe because in their religion, war was something they didn't do. And they don't talk with him or her. And this soldier might be living in a bedsit or a tiny hotel room with a small pension from the army. And it's like a closed box. They actually have the bed, the toilet, and a tiny kitchen in the one room. Okay, they're out of an active war zone, they're there. They might have a limp. Okay. And every single night the train goes past, because there might be a train station nearby, or there might be a car yard nearby where he's staying. And every day, every morning, he hears a loud bang. He wakes up reaching for a gun because he thinks he's in the war zone, and he's just panicking because he's like, my friends, I need to get to my friends, I need to get into my other soldiers, because if I don't get to them, they're going to be in trouble. And it just loops and loops and loops around and around because of one sound. And they might be trapped in the moment. It's not a flashback, it's just they're reacting emotionally to a situation. They hear a loud bang. Okay, that loud bang, maybe it's just a crane dropping a car into the car yard or the scrap yard. Okay, you and I might recognize it. A normal person who hasn't had that traumatic situation will recognize it as a car being dropped. But this person who's just come out of an active war zone will think, bomb. It's a bomb, right? So they will be trapped. So they will connect the sound to what they know. And their brain won't make the connection go, we're out. Haven't you realized we're out? They won't make the connection. Their brain has basically been trained to respond in a certain way when they hear certain sounds. They hear a bang, like they hear an explosion, they duck for cover. They go get their squad mates and get out of there, right? So they're trained to react in a certain way, and their brain will continue to react in a certain way because they haven't been desensitized. Okay, so this person might be driving a car. They see a plastic bag. Okay, they see a box in the middle of the road. It's just a box, right? They swerve to avoid it. They nearly hit a pedestrian and smash into a pole. That box became an IED, a bomb in the ground, because they would basically just react, okay, and they don't understand. So the way the trauma affects the soldier who's just come out of an active war zone is different to someone with abandonment issues. It will be different from someone who's been in an abusive relationship. So someone in an abusive relationship who's gotten out, okay, they will react differently to someone who's been abandoned and someone who's got PTSD. So someone who's just come out of an abusive relationship, maybe the person had threatened to kill them if they left. They're out, the person's in jail. They know the person's in jail, logically. But they still find themselves avoiding going out at night. They still find themselves twitching every time they hear a sound in their apartment, thinking it's them. They might be constantly looking around, think someone's following them. They see a car parked in front of their house, and they think it's him, he's or her, and they're gonna hurt me. They're gonna hurt me. They might call the cops because they think that person in the car is their partner and is coming to hurt them, but it's not. It's just a relative of the neighbor who's just come and visited them for the first time. They will react. They might become overly paranoid. They think, I've got to get out. He's going to find me. So they might become overly paranoid. Their fight or flight sensors are just going to be through the roof. And they're just going to be on edge. They might be on edge on the entire time. And so someone who's been in a domestic violence situation, they could be react like that. They could also react in another way. They can be overly angry. Someone who even makes a certain move that their brain interprets as, this guy's going to hurt me, they react aggressively. They might fight someone. They might punch someone, because they couldn't do that to the person who harmed them in the first place, and they've been triggered by something, a smell, a sound. They're trapped in the moment, and they're just like, I just want this person to pay for what he did. And they think it's just the person who attacked them the first time or harmed them the first time, but it may be their friend who's just concerned about them. Okay, maybe the person can't sleep because every creak from there might be the roof, they think it's the person coming up the stairs. They might think they're in their old place. So they might be overly submissive. They agree to whatever people say to avoid conflict because of their relationship. They believe that, or at least they may have believed that if I was quiet, if I had just done what the person said, everything would have been all right. So the way people react is very, very different. I'll see if I can put these links. So before I started writing my second book, Unspoken, I basically did research into PTSD. I mean, I have some idea of how trauma affects people as, like, because of the studies I've done as a teacher, but not as in-depth as this, because these characters have got, in Unspoken, PTSD. Like, half of them have got PTSD, depression, anxiety, paranoia, anger issues, attachment issues. They've got like pretty much everything under the sun. And I need to do background research into it. There's these two links. So there's this article, I think, or this blog by Lisa Hall Wilson. It was written in 2018. It's basically called How to Write About PTSD in Deep Point of View. And basically they go around through, because this person has PTSD. They're also an author. They basically talk about what authors get wrong about PTSD, what else is to PTSD besides flashbacks, coping mechanisms, things that might trigger how to show a trigger with PTSD rather than tell. How to know what your character's primary goal is when they're triggered. A blindsided character, so a character blindsided by a trigger, could be an all is lost moment, dark moment. So it's really, really good. I'll put the link in the video below for you guys because it is really good, and I do suggest you read it if you're writing emotionally damaged characters. There's also another article about abuse. I read this one because, well, one of the characters is dealing with abuse, domestic abuse, or they've escaped the situation, so they're dealing with the aftermath of it. And basically, it's called How to Write Abuse in Fiction. It's actually a DeviantArt article by Whisper the Wolfie. It's a journal that they've made. I'll put the link again for this one. But what they talk about is really good. They give examples. So they talk about what abuse looks like, how the abuse or emotional abuse can manifest. So emotional abuse can manifest in a story. So emotionally neglectful, verbally abusive, manipulative. They also explain it in a lot of detail, like the way people will react, what sort of things the abusers may say. They go into why emotional abusers are abusive. Victim typical behaviors during abuse, anxiety and withdrawal, extreme aggression or submission. My character, she is not submissive. She's extremely aggressive. Because she will lash out at people, or she will want to lash out and she just bites her tongue and tries to hold it in, which isn't healthy either. They might do emotionally age inappropriate behavior, so temper tantrums, rebellious actions, detachment from others, extremely low self-esteem, extreme compliance with the abuser. So this is during the abuse. So if you're writing a story while the abuse is happening, this is how they may react during. They may also react the same way after, because that's all they know, how to deal with the situation. Sarcasm, sass, and snark, basically verbal rebellion, which is something I've mentioned. Basically, it's a coping mechanism. So sarcasm, humor are coping mechanisms. It's just a way of dealing with the trauma and just to avoid the issues. They use it to, sarcasm especially, it allows you to attack the person that's triggering you or is being like emotionally abusive towards you. Generally speaking, if a character is very sarcastic and they've been in an abusive situation, they will also show either withdrawal, rebellious behavior, and even all aggression. They may show all of it, may show some of it. Addictions, I've mentioned. They would go into a lot of detail, what it feels like when you are the victim, how they would react to the situation, they use their own experiences as well. They go into, okay, for writers, I want my victim character to also be the hero of the story, even while being abused. Can I do that? They explain in a really good way how to actually do that, how to make a hero character who is in an abusive situation actually do that. They talk about the tortured artist character trope, which is very crap. It's a very terrible trope. Basically why it's a bad idea, because this person is also an artist, and they're like, it's no way realistic. That trope is not realistic at all. Now, art can be a coping mechanism. It could be a way of escape. It does not mean that it is their artist is only great. Their art is only great because of this. No, they were great before, or it's just a way for escape. They talk about the aftermath of abuse when it's over. what happens, how they react, how to actually incorporate it in a story, how to write about recovery, how to write about physical abuse and the emotional aspect of physical abuse. They also go over how to write abuse stories well. And they use Harry Potter as an example. Now, before I read this, I was like, not realistic at all. I thought it wasn't realistic at all, the way they portrayed the abuse, because I'm like, he's kept in a cupboard under the stairs. They verbally abuse him. They've threatened him with physical harm. They've starved him. I thought he was too well adjusted. But the way this person explains it is actually, I went, oh, that makes sense. Because they do point out some of the things Harry does in the books that actually shows, doesn't tell, it shows the symptoms of abuse and how it affected them. Things like low self-esteem, extreme anger, verbal rebellion, how he reacts to bullying, and all that sort of stuff. It's really good, the article, and I do suggest you read it for those of you who are interested in writing emotionally damaged characters, particularly characters who have suffered abuse. So I've actually incorporated some of the stuff that I've read in here in my story, because I'm like, I need to actually do the characters justice. And because while I can write about trauma from my own experiences pretty well, I can't, it's hard to write about trauma that you haven't experienced, and it's hard to do it in a way that's meaningful and respectful. Hence a lot of the research, because I do want it to be respectful. Another text, if you want to write emotionally damaged characters, I would look into getting a copy of The Emotional Wounds Thesaurus by Angela Ackerman and Becca Puglisi. I think I've done a review on this. Basically, it's a writer's guide to psychological trauma. They have a whole, there's a whole bit about emotional wounds, a character arc, villain's journey for who has an emotional wound, brainstorming it, have problems to avoid in your writing, and they also got, they've broken it down, the emotional wounds into crime and victimization, things like carjacking, home invasion, physical assault, being held captive, being victimized by a perp who was never caught, witnessing a murder. They've also got emotional wounds from disabilities and disfigurements, so speech impediment. That's a big one, because it can be traumatic, particularly not the impediment itself, but the way people treat you because of it. Brain injury, mental disorders, failures and mistakes as well, things like accidentally killing someone, caving to peer pressure, failing to do the right thing. They've got stuff about injustice and hardship, so abuses of power, falsely accused for crime, being fired, being forced to leave one's homeland, living through civil unrest, wrongful imprisonment. Wrongful imprisonment definitely impacts my character. Misplaced trust and betrayal, so sibling betrayals, toxic relationships, being disowned or shunned, finding out that your parent was a monster, telling the truth but not being believed. They've also got specific childhood wounds, like a nomadic childhood, so maybe moving around, abandonment, being raised by an addict, neglectful parents, growing up in foster care, witnessing violence as a young age. They've got a bit about traumatic events, so things like life-threatening accident, a suicide by a loved one, parent divorce, school shooting, being tortured, watching someone die. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in here. And in each of those sections, let's see if I can find it in here. In each of those sections, you've got examples of what that particular thing is. So, for example, being held captive. So it's like being kidnapped, held for a ransom, kept captive for an extended period of time, sold into slavery. They give you examples. The basic needs that are compromised by the wound, the false beliefs that the victim could embrace because of the wound. So things like Stockholm Syndrome, survivor's guilt, things the character may fear, possible responses and results to the particular trauma. So things like fatigue, depression and anxiety, losing interest in things they once enjoyed, self-medicating to cope, feeling powerless, believing that one escaped for a purpose and living to fulfill that purpose. That is an example of how, for Tony Stark, Iron Man. Tony Stark from Iron Man, after he escapes from Afghanistan, he goes on this journey, he builds the Iron Man suit, and he basically, there's a line where he says to Pepper, I shouldn't be alive unless it was for a reason. And he wants to fulfill that reason because his person he was held captive with asked him not to waste his life. So that was actually Iron Man is a pretty well developed character with this particular emotional wound. They also talk about personality traits that might be a form, so attributes, flaws, triggers that might aggravate the wound, opportunities to face or overcome the wound. So it's fairly detailed. So each one is about like 2 pages long, and they're written in basic English. And this can be helpful. It can give you ideas of how to write the particular trauma. So I do suggest that. Yeah, so that's basically all I've got for emotionally damaged characters. This video is getting a bit too long, but yeah. So hopefully that helps. The main thing is when you're writing a character that is emotionally damaged, the emotional damage can't be all they are. It has to influence their actions and the way they interact and form connections with others, but it can't be the only thing about them. It's not a personality trait. Emotional damage is not a personality trait. It is something that impacts and affects a person's actions, reactions, and connections with others. It is not a personality trait, and it shouldn't be treated as one. It's fine to do this and to have emotional damage and trauma in a comedy book. You can have a humor book, in the humor genre and comedy genre, and that's fine. With an emotionally damaged character, that is fine, as long as the emotional damage is not what is humorous, or people's reactions to the emotional damage isn't humorous. The damage needs to be treated seriously. The other things like comedy, like if it's a comedy of errors, the errors themselves can be hilarious, and the way those characters talk with each other can be hilarious. But the trauma itself that a character has cannot be made fun of. You can poke fun, the character can poke fun at themselves, but to deal with the situation, but you can't poke fun at the trauma itself, and you need to take the trauma itself seriously. That's pretty much it. So I will be doing some live streams, at least 3 live streams a week during the first 2 weeks of Camp Nano because I am on school holidays. Yay! I am so far behind on my writing. It's ridiculous. I'll be writing a bit later today, but honestly, my mind is like bleh. Yeah, so Wednesday, I'll be doing the live stream. Wednesday, this is in Australian time, by the way. Wednesday, 10 a.m. Friday, 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. And Sunday, 12 o'clock in the afternoon, Australian Eastern Standard Time. So the 12 o'clock one is about 10 p.m. Eastern Time, Canadian US time. Yeah. So hopefully I'll see you at the live streams. Bye.